Hi there. In this video we are going to learn how to create S3 bucket, list all existing buckets, upload a file to S3 bucket, and download a file from S3 bucket using boto3 Python. We are going to take help from the boto3 documentation provided by AWS. I'll add the link in the description. Now let's copy the first piece of example from the code and paste it into our Visual Studio Code editor. We need to install boto3 package, otherwise our code is going to throw module not found error. See, it is throwing module not found error. So we are going to install it by using pip. So just type pip install boto3, hit enter. Now let it install. Now we have our boto3 installed. In this function, we are going to pass our S3 credentials through this code itself, but for best practices, please pass your credentials via environment variables. So now I am going to create two variables, which is access key and a secret key. Make sure you have your access key and your secret key ready with you. If not, then please watch my last video. I'll provide the link in the description. This is my access key, and now I'll copy my secret key as well. Now we need to authenticate boto3 client using our access key and secret key. So we need to do some changes here. Here we need to pass AWS access key ID, which is equal to our access key, and now AWS secret access key. Make sure you name it correctly, otherwise it will throw error. Cool. Now we are going to call this function. So here we have two conditions. One is having if we are not providing any region, and the second one if we are providing location constant, which is the reason. So let's call the function. I'll copy the name. So let my bucket name is KT my test bucket 10. Let's call this function. If it returns true, that means our bucket got created. Since I can see it returned true. There is no error. Let's check in our S3 console. So this is my S3 console. I already have one bucket named as my test bucket 2. Let's refresh it. Great. So here we can see this is our bucket which recently got created, and since we haven't passed any region, specified region, so that's why it got created in US S1. Now let's create one more bucket in a specified region. Make sure you you make sure you do the changes in else part as well, otherwise it is going to throw credential error. Now let's change the name of the bucket and change the region from none to any specified region. You can get the list of the regions from AWS documentation. I'm going to create my bucket in Asia Pacific Mumbai region. Now let's run the code again. Looks like it ran successfully. Let's go to our management console and check. Let me refresh. Great, here it is. We have our test bucket 11 and it is in Asia Pacific Mumbai region. Now next we are going to learn how we can list all these buckets through boto3. Def list buckets, no parameters within it. Now let's copy the second example code from the documentation. Make sure the indentations are correct. We'll keep it inside try block. And in the exception, accept exception as error. Let's log the error. Now here also we need to provide the credentials. Copy it from above. Looks good. On successful completion, it is going to show the existing buckets. Now let's call this function list buckets. Cool. Now let's run our code. Here it is. It is printing existing buckets and the name of the buckets that we have, which is 10, 11 and 2. We can verify it from our management console. We have 3 buckets with name my test bucket 10, 11 and 2. Next, we are going to learn how to upload a file to an S3 bucket. Okay, so let's comment the above function call and create a separate space. Let's name it upload file to S3 bucket. Now let's go back to the documentation. Here we have uploading files. Let's copy the example and paste it into the VS Code. Cool. So here it takes three parameters: file name, bucket name, and the object name. So to provide the file name, create a separate variable file name equals and then provide the absolute path of the file. Then the bucket will provide it from the function call itself and the object name. So here if you'll see, the object name is equals to the file name, but since we are going to provide the absolute path of the file name, so we are going to split the file name to its name only. Dot split and in Windows the path is followed by double forward slashes, so we are going to split it by forward slashes and then we are going to pick the last object which will be our file name. So this is -1. Now again we have to provide the credentials to the client. Let's copy it from above. Okay, so now let's get the file name. I have a file in my desktop. Let's get its absolute path. So here it is. Now as I mentioned, the absolute path is followed by double forward slashes and then the file name itself, which is test.txt. Now let's call this function. Upload file with file name equals file name itself. We need to provide bucket and here provide your bucket name. Let's upload it to this bucket, which is kt my test bucket 10. And for the object name, I think it will by default take the file name itself from this part of the code, so no need to pass it from here. Cool, let's save it and run our code. Looks like our code ran successfully. Let's go to our management console and verify. So here is our my test bucket 10. Let's go inside it and verify if we have our, here it is, we have our test.txt uploaded successfully. Next we are going to learn how to download an object from S3 bucket. Let's comment this function call and create a separate space for our next function. Let's call it download object from S3 bucket. Let's go back to the documentation and see our next example. Here we have downloading files. Let's copy this. Let's create a separate function for downloading object. Let's call it download object with no parameters. Inside try block, let's paste the code that we copied. And in exception as error, let's log the error. Now here we need to provide the credentials. Let's copy it from above. Now here we need to replace these parameters, which is bucket name, object name, and the file name where we need to save our downloaded file. So let's replace the bucket name by our bucket, which is kt myTestBucket 10, and our object name is test.txt, and the path where we need to save this object. So let's save it at this location. So I'm going to save it in my desktop with the name test1.txt. Let's save the code and call our function. Let's run the code. It looks like it ran successfully. Let's check in our desktop if we have test1.txt. Yes, here it is. We have our file test1.txt. So this completes all the learnings from this video, where we learned how to create S3 buckets then listing all the existing S3 buckets, upload a file to S3 bucket, and then download a file from S3 bucket. Thank you.